Hello, everybody. We're back live with myself here, as you can see me, and Mr. David Amerland, who everybody knows and loves. David is just coming out from telling me that in the next 10 days, his new book is going to be officially out, and you can buy it. And you'll be able to buy it on davidamerland.com, amazon.com, and eventually, soon afterwards, in all the high-quality bookstores. And I'll let David say hello and say a few words about the new book.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Thank you very much for that introduction. And yes, it's pretty exciting. I'm relieved more than excited because it is almost 2 years of my life. And as you get towards the end, you know how you say a race is only run in the last 100 meters. It doesn't matter how long it is. Well, it's always like that. It gets really tense. But anyway, we made a print window. Everything's going according to plan. So within the next 10 days or so, it should be available. I'll keep everybody posted, and it's on trust. And it couldn't be more topical. Thanks to VW.
And the actual name of the book, David, is?
It's called The Tribe That Discovered Trust. There's three distinct sections to the book, just to give you a little bit of background. Each section does something very specific, and there's a workbook inside that. If you ever wondered how you're going to use trust in anything, that's going to cover it.
This is the book for you. And the book is so up to date, in case you have been following this story about debacle at the Volkswagen, which just came out, whatever it was, I don't know, a week or so ago, a couple of weeks maybe. It's actually mentioned in David's book. This is how up to date, up with the times, however you want to say it, this book is, that it actually has the mention of that particular situation in the book. So definitely davidamerland.com, get the book. Speaking of books, of course, today we got together for the discussion from David's prior book called SEO Help. And that book has been out for over a year now, right, David?
It's been not quite a year. I think it came out last February. End of January.
Okay, so we're getting close to a year. Yeah, and so a lot of people, got the book. A lot of people talked about it, used it, continue to use it. And so this is this video, for those that don't know, is regarding, it's basically we're going through every single chapter in the book, and there are 20 specific steps, as David calls them, or each step is a chapter in the book. And right now we just got to chapter number 5, step number 5, which is we're going to talk about content. So if you, for those who are watching this the first time, feel free to go to the community specifically set up for the SEO Help book. You can search in communities, you'll see it. And in that community, you'll see a bunch of posts. And at the same time, you will see all the prior videos. There's a video for every single step. And so we're up to step number 5 now, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So without further ado, what exactly is this whole thing with the content? And obviously, if you think about it in a simplistic way, anything we generate, everything we create that goes online, regardless of what the purpose is or what the reason is, it's all content. Anything you create is content. So that part is really simple. We know we can create stuff. We know we can put it out there. Some of it comes from social media. Some of it comes through our websites. Some of it comes from blogs. We create all the stuff. And so all the stuff goes out there. And then we kind of throw up our hands and go, okay, and how does that work? And this is where a lot of people get this stuff wrong, unfortunately, because, creating content is not hard. Creating good content is very hard, and doing so consistently. And the reason for that is because you have different kinds of people. They're looking for different kinds of things. And a lot of people, we talked about before about people making mistakes and creating content based on what they feel they want to put out there, versus looking at it from a standpoint of people who are actually going to be consuming that content they create. And from the people who are consuming standpoint, they're looking for certain things in a certain way. And the best way to create content, I think everybody would agree, and David will correct me if I'm wrong here, is to create content for those people who are actually consuming the content, not people who are creating the content. So if we all agree with that, and we say, okay, so we're trying to gear it towards people that are consuming, what kind of content should be created? And in my personal view, you have two different things going on. You have one side of the formula, so to speak, where you're creating content for people to consume it. I mean, we just said that, and that makes sense. But another part of it is SEO part, and I think David hopefully will give us a lot more detail than I can give you about that end of it, because that's what the book specifically talks about, is the SEO impact of all this stuff. And the two can be congruent, and everybody should try to do whatever they can to make it congruent. But at the same time, they are sometimes two different things. In other words, we do not meet people on the street and talk to them about our business with SEO in mind. It's just not how we talk. So the talking typically takes place of how we talk, we gesture, we make faces, whatever we do to get the point across, and we try to keep it kind of concise, because people don't have 10 hours to listen to how great our business is and things like that. So all of that, the idea is to transfer all of this wisdom, if you will, from real life into online. The problem is it's very difficult to do with just text, or even with text and graphics, to convey the same message in the same way. And that's where I think a lot of people, unfortunately, have a lot of problems doing this, because a lot of my own clients ask me, okay, so should I have a blog? The other day people asked me, and I said, okay, well, it depends. And of course, immediately you get, the eyes open up, like, I'm paying you to consult for me. What is kind of answer is, it depends. It doesn't mean that doesn't do anything for me. I'm asking a simple yes or no question. And that's basically it. So I think what we want to talk today about in more detail, I mean, obviously, if you don't have the book, get the book. But I think what we want to get more deeply into specifics of generating content. Obviously, for every business, it will be different, but there is still some best practices, best approach type view, from which I'm sure David can talk about in much more detail, that people should look at when they create content. In other words, you have to create content, otherwise there's not going to be any SEO, there's not going to be anything. If you don't create something out there for people to see, they can't see anything, so you have to create it. So David, I'd like to open with basically this kind of general, at the same time loaded question. What is the best mindset, if you will, or approach people should take when trying to create content for their businesses, for their websites?
Whoa, okay. Fun. Love your introduction to this. I love the fact that you actually mentioned content which is created for search engines and content which is created for human visitors. This is exactly what used to happen. We used to create content for search engines first because we had to, and human visitors are far second, because at the end of the day, it was search engines that got human visitors to our website. And we live in more enlightened times. We know that in semantic search and semantic web, it doesn't matter so much how many people you get through the door if they're not relevant. So that immediately sets the mindset. At the end of the day, whatever content you create, and we have a lot of choices. We have text, we have memes, we have photographs, we have quotes, we have podcasts, we have video. I mean, that's 6 straight off the bat. So we can create any of those or all of those. But whatever you actually decide to do, if it's not relevant to what you do, which means it has to be relevant to your visitors, not your industry experts. As you said, very pointed comment. You write for the people you want to do business with, rather than the people who happen to be in your industry sector. So if you want to create content for them, it has to be relevant. The moment we talk relevance, all the other things begin to fall into place. And here's what happens. First of all, we talk about business identity. Then we talk about business ethos. Then we talk about business tone, business voice. How do you talk to all these people? Which means you also need to know, who are you talking to, or who are you hoping to talk to? You must be able to understand them. What is important to them? How do they communicate? Are they okay, for instance, spending 45 minutes going through a very convoluted, very complicated text with very many technical points, hyperlinks leading to everywhere else, and the kind of authoritative sources that perhaps some people like to go to? Or are they the kind of people who want a quick 5-minute read with a summary at the end and an action call? If you know your audience, that's what you're actually generating content for. Which means then you start looking at your own resources. What are you capable of doing? Because not everybody is able to write very well. Not everybody can write very technically. So You take it from there, what are your limitations, and then you start building on the kind of content strategy, if you like, which will help your business connect with your target audience. So the mindset has to be relevance. What is relevant to my traffic? What is relevant to the people I'm hoping to do business with? And then the second question to that is, how do I get that content produced? How do I make sure that it pushes all the right buttons, it answers all the right questions, it reflects all the right values, and above all, it's a kind of content that becomes part of a larger ongoing online conversation.
Makes perfect sense. In terms of looking at the content, kind of from as a pathway from beginning to the end, I think one of the things that we talked about before is one of your steps is on identity. And I think that's one of the most important things that people need to realize, that when you're creating a website or you're creating online presence, as David himself very astutely pointed out in somebody's hangout, that you're not dealing with the business, you're dealing with the people behind the business. So it's the same way when your traffic comes to you, they want to know about you on a personal level, not about how screwed up your mother-in-law is or anything like that, or how you brush your teeth this morning. But they want to know a little bit about you, perhaps about the fact that you have a family. You don't need to disclose your kids' ages or their birthmarks or anything, but we're talking about the fact that you have a family. It tells somebody something about what kind of a person you might be. And if you tell them a little bit about the business, how you started it, why you started it, what your vision is, things like that, they get to paint some kind of a picture about you. And of course, speaking of David's new book on trust, in the end, this is where you're trying to drive all of this content, all of this traffic for the purpose of trust. Because in the end, if you just peel all the layers aside, as David likes to call them, you're peeling the layers all the time. You get all the layers aside. Why are you doing all this stuff? Are you doing the content for online presence just for the sake of online presence or for the sake of content? Why are you doing this? The reason you're doing it is because if you're doing it for business purposes, it's either because you're trying to sell a service or you're trying to sell a product. Or in some cases, you're trying to sell yourself. No matter what it is, the bottom line is that's the reason you're doing all of this. So if you look at it from a standpoint of trying to sell, let's say, a product, then people need to trust you to buy from you this product, which means you need to give enough information there to create trust, because you're not talking to them like we're talking right now. Right now, I'm looking into your face, into your eyes. You can see my eyes. You can see I'm looking directly at you, even though I'm looking at my camera, but it looks like I'm looking at you. And the reason for that is because that's how people used to, have always interacted. And that's having this conversation going, engagement going back and forth. That's what creates a certain amount of trust based on the information passed and received. And then once the trust is in place, and of course, I'm very interested in buying from you because they trust you. You make the product I want. So number one is, who are you dealing with? That's one piece of content. So you get some information about that. Number two is, I need to trust you. How do I trust you? Online, in terms of online, you need to show your relevance in terms of what it is that you sell, not just the products, but why should somebody be buying from you? So you have to build credibility. And to build credibility, you need to give them some information that would make you credible in their eyes, which would be maybe reviews, maybe it'll be testimonials from clients, maybe it'll be peer reviews, maybe it would be some articles that you publish. All these different things create credibility. And then this certain amount of interaction combined with credibility, knowledge about you, that's what creates a certain amount of trust to the point of potentially pulling the trigger and buying something. Then the next thing that happens, the customer service comes in. And then if there is something even semi-wrong, when people take care of customer service right, then you have a customer for life. At that point, you're done. They're just going to be coming back to your site, buying. So you just provide the information they need to be able to easily contact you, easily buy from you. But this piece beforehand, to getting to the trust part, that's the kind of content you should be creating, in my view. You should be creating the thing to build your credibility. You should be creating information that they can get all the information they need about the products, services, and of course about you yourself. That's part of the credibility. And they should have some of this other information like testimonials, things like that. So that's basic elements kind of the generic type website that would should work, or the kind of content you create for any business. And then also, I think one of the things that important afterwards is on a continuous basis. If you look at David, I'm going to use you as the example here because you're here, and you can counter it if you need to. You can see that, you know, when he put out when he was working on the book for trust, very few people actually knew. I'm one of the privileged few that did, that he's working on a new book. And then he didn't give me the name or anything. I just knew there had to be a book dealing with trust. Okay. And he trusted me to make sure I don't blabber anywhere. And I didn't. But the point here is that this information was out there to some people. They knew he was working on the book for trust. If you looked at his posts at that time for the last, let's say, the last 3 months, as an example, you can see that David was posting, he posts a lot of different things, but a lot of these things had to do with trust. He has specific articles, and you can see that there are certain elements of the article that kind of either use the word trust, or they have a lot of relevance dealing with the trust issues, different things like that. And, you know, I'll have David explain a little bit more, because obviously it's very clear to me that that's part of his completely non-threatening, completely non-invasive method of getting Google to participate in the process on the SEO side, to make sure that by the time the book comes out, he's got this wealth of content that he created dealing with the topic at hand. So before, he wrote books on SEO, dealing with SEO in general, books on I think digital marketing,
media.
I'm sorry? Social media. Yeah, so there was different things, and David still posts about those. But this particular, I could see that there was this, clearly for somebody that knew, and, you know, I was somebody that knew, you could see that he's doing a certain amount of, a little bit more of a nudging in the area of trust. And I knew that there was a book going to be coming out about trust. So I think for any business that's doing things and they're thinking about how do you create content on a continuous basis, because it's tough. Initially, you build a site, you put all the stuff, you think you know what you know your people want, you know who they are. It's a lot easier to say. You need to know your audience, you need to know what they want, you give them what they want. Those kind of words are exactly right, but at the same time, they're not specific enough for your business to identify what exactly should you be doing in that case. But this example here is very specific to the project, which is the new book on trust, and certain number of posts that go out there specifically dealing with the subject of trust. So to me, this is a perfect case study, if you will, perfect example of how content is being created on a consistent basis, dealing with a particular topic at hand. And, you know, there were articles about Volkswagen that came out that didn't necessarily mean to be something regarding to trust, but David posted in such a way where it wound up being news, and at the same time, it winds up being relevant to what he's going to be talking about in the book. David, do you want to go a little bit more into detail about the process of using all these different things to specifically continuously put out good content relevant to you?
Yep, definitely. And thank you very much. I think what you pointed out is absolutely spot on and very much on point in the way that any kind of business should operate. And this is what it is. Essentially, whatever we do on the web, Google looks at it through a prism that examines three things: authority, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. So essentially, whatever content you put out there, Google wants to see that you have some kind of expertise in the way you structure, the way you say it, the way you actually create value in that. You have some kind of authority in terms of it's not derivative. You know, you're not copying somebody else and just copying and pasting. And then you have trustworthiness in terms of having people's attention and delivering value to them, which is essentially what trust is in this kind of context. And we need to remember that what trust does, trust is the way you monetize the attention economy. So if you have somebody's attention, but you don't have their trust, nothing's going to happen. So if you don't manage to create that trust, you know, trying very hard to get people to listen to you or see what you post isn't going to lead to anything else. So in order to do this, you need to have content that reflects what you're doing. And the easiest way to do it, of course, is pull it from your current activities, from your current passions, from the fires that drive your business. In my particular case, it's usually either business cases I happen to do analysis for and consult for, and usually I pull stuff from there which is suitably anonymized, so I can share it publicly, or the books which I write, which have a lot of research and a lot of stuff which provides insights and original ideas, and I share them very broadly. And I do it for two reasons. First of all, I'm really excited by that. So I get it out there, and it's really fulfilling for me because it becomes part of the conversation I have with a lot of people I like on the web. Secondly, I add value to all those people who follow my posts. They haven't got the time or the expertise or the inclination sometimes to go through reams and reams of research just for a couple of nuggets. But I do, and I do. When I do it, I don't keep it to myself, I share it. And then all that becomes part of that expertise, authority, and trustworthiness, because also those posts are reshared, they become part of the discussion, and discussion sometimes can be very involved, and Google sees that. So essentially, it begins to sense that whatever I'm posting about is what I'm focusing on. So when I actually bring out a product, which in this case is a book, so it is essentially a product, Google has no problem classifying that product under my expertise, under a certain authority, and a certain depth of approach. So that's how I did it. But let's say that I wasn't writing books. Let's say I was a jeweler. You know, there's so many things happening in the world of jewelry every day. You know, from the way the business is looking at blood diamonds, for instance, to the way diamonds themselves are being priced in the market, to the fluctuating prices of gold, to platinum, to white gold, to the new metals coming in, to surgical steel being used in jewelry. Now, I happen to know all this from things I pick up on the web. I'm not even a jeweler, and I could actually do it. So if it's your business, there's massive amounts of stuff that you can look at. Now, the trap we fall into usually is because it's our business, because it's part of our everyday reality, we forget how exciting it is. We think, for us, you know, nothing's happened. I've happened to go into business, which a tech business. They work globally. They work in cloud storage, incredibly vital field. So many things happen, and I ask them, what's new? And they go, oh, nothing much. And they've got an R&D department that brings out stuff every day. But to them, it's everyday stuff. And they forget to actually see it with the eyes of the outsider, the eyes of their target customer, who should be reading about their exciting content, their exciting breakthroughs, their exciting innovations, which would then make it easy for that customer to say, hey, I'm going to go with these guys because they're cutting edge. Now, you know, and this is a large company I happen to have worked with. Because they didn't do that, they were losing out to competition, which wasn't as good, but it had a higher advertising budget, and they didn't. So they were losing out business, even though they were better, and they ended up having a smaller slice of the market, simply because they didn't actually get fired up by what they were doing, or rather, they forgot to look at their business from the eyes of their prospective customer and get that passion across. So this is a good lesson to actually remember.
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the clients I had, actually still have them for right now anyway, is a resort company. And I went on vacation one time over there. And, you know, I noticed I've been, you know, trying to push them into social media for a long time. And, you know, they because they wanted to promote their rental program, things like that. So I see this post that, you know, they put a post without any pictures or anything, it's just text post that says, we have rental rates, you know, so many dollars per night through the end of May. And then the next post says we have rental rates through the end of May for this. And I'm like, you can't get more creative than this. I mean, this is the best you can do. You actually expect people to follow you when you simply post, you know, something like that. And the interesting thing is, I mean, the thing that I want to point out to people to give specific examples is when I came to the resort with the family on vacation, we wanted to go fishing. And, you know, I have no idea. I mean, I know general area there because I've been there on business working for them in terms of computer stuff, but I have no idea about all the details where people go fishing, where would be the best spot. My daughter wanted to go possibly golfing, and, you know, we didn't know anything in terms of the actual activities there. So I asked them, you know, where should we go? And they had this one lady that knew the town like the back of her hand. And I'm like, you have this immense resource right there in the office. You got a bunch of times when you guys are very quiet, nobody's in the office. I'm a customer at this point. I'm not your IT director, which is basically what I'm for them, but I'm coming in as just a guy saying, where can I go fishing? You're giving me this story about where I can go fishing. You think I'm the only guy that comes to this place that wants to go fishing? And this is the thing that basically that's the biggest disconnect, is that people think about creating content like it's some kind of extra chore that you need to finish university to know how to do. You're just creating some information for people who are looking for it. That's never forget that. That's the main reason you're doing it, is because somebody is looking for information and you're using this vehicle, if you will, to get it to them. So get it to them. You got a guy coming in asking you, where to go fishing. You know that a lot of people ask about that kind of stuff. Create immediately, as soon as he leaves, create a blog post, says, this is where you go fishing in McCall, Idaho. And then you put in, slap a picture in there of the place, or, find it online if you don't have an existing one. And, write 2 paragraphs about this is the place where you want to go. Maybe have a link, a location link over there to go to the place. And there's a post right there out of the blue with somebody asking a question. Somebody comes in and says to a bakery and says, do you have challah today? And the answer is, we only bake challah on Friday. Okay, create a little post. Show a picture of challah. Tell them that you're only doing this on Fridays. Give them a little history behind the deal. What the heck is it? Some people don't even know what challah is. So there's your opportunity to do that. So what I'm saying is that when you create, where you're looking to create content, we talked about the basic initial steps, creating something that people want, creating something that they need, in terms of people being your core audience, if you will, or people who come to your website, or people who you would like to come to your website. So you're trying to give them information about the business, all of these things we talked about before. But now, since you're done with that part, what do you do next? Because that's one of the big questions. Okay, I got my website set up. I'm not going to be changing it every week. Am I? No, you're not. Because information about you doesn't change that often and everything else. But you can certainly have a blog, or you can have social media posts. There's a lot of different ways that you can continue to create content on a continuous basis. And talking to your customers, which people do all day long, gives you tremendous amount of valuable information that you can put on. Because if you listen to, then you already know it. But for those that haven't listened to my video before on frequently asked questions, there was a hangout I did specifically on that topic, frequently asked questions. And we talked about how, best practices, how to set it up, what to do, what not to do, things like that. But if you really think about it, the website itself is really nothing more than a glorified or amplified, if you will, frequently asked questions dissemination point. So if that's the case, if we're creating the pages and everything specifically to address people's needs and people's desires, if that's the purpose of it, then you can continue to think in the same way when you create content, is because there's always additional things people want. There's always things that happen that in some way are relevant to particular business. Like one of my businesses I deal with is a Mexican restaurant. So I posted a post for them about the history of burritos. Is that interesting? I mean, if you keep posting nothing but pictures of food, pictures of Mexican food, for example, in this case, then it gets boring, it gets old. I mean, how much Mexican food pictures can you look at? I mean, there's only so many I can look at, that's for sure. So it just, that's not what the content, and especially from SEO standpoint, is all about. But when you start getting into relevant things that are interesting to people, which will make them come back, and things that are related to your business, that's where you're hitting the nerve, and that's where you're hitting. So number one, you got interesting things. Number two is things that they're looking for, things that they want to be able to do. So these kind of things that happen in business in general on a daily basis, definitely it's an excellent point, in my view, to use that as part of your content creation process. And to go back to my previous example that David was talking about Volkswagen, and him creating this post and tying the Volkswagen situation with the trust situation in the book and everything else in the very kind of, it wasn't specifically done that way, it just came out that way. Obviously, he knew why he was doing it, but I'm just saying, when you read the article, it's just an article, but you wind up being completely up to date with the events that are going on. And so if you hear, like in case of this particular resort, they have another resort in Sun Valley, Idaho, and they have this theater where they have all kinds of famous people come and perform all the time. So right there, you got schedule of all these famous people coming in. Drop the line that, Barry Manilow is coming to play, or, they have this famous skating rink there with all the Olympic athletes come there to train and stuff. I mean, they got so much information content-wise they could be putting out there, but it's all related to staying there at the resort, enjoying the amenities, enjoying the the surroundings, everything else. I think it's true for any kind of business. You can look at it from that standpoint, talking to clients, looking at what's going on in the world, and just seeing how it relates. And then that's one of the nice things about social media. You can create content very concise, because people are not going to be reading for 10 hours. You can't do that. You have to make it relatively concise. And then, David, the next thing, with that being, I think I beat the thing sufficiently here. In terms of SEO then, so now that we have identified kind of the different generic areas where people can look at to try to get information for the content that they're going to create, now in terms of actually going out and creating it, what should they be looking for specifically to from the SEO standpoint?
Okay, and that's a spot-on question now, because this is exactly what we're talking about. You want essentially to kill two birds with one stone. You want to create content which will attract human traffic, visitors who are going to be part of your online conversation audience. Some of them will convert and become your customers, and some will become advocates who will bring you more customers. But you also want what you create to begin to reflect your authority sufficiently for search engines to begin to promote your website and your content and your social media profiles. So essentially, what do you do on this? Well, there's 3 or 4 things you can do. One thing is you use your social media accounts, which are linked to your website, and you promote through that either content which is original. For instance, you create something which is specific to social media, but you also create an additional link which you put in there, which creates, which links to an additional aspect of the conversation or additional aspects of information, which make that content the content you create relevant and a little bit broader. So, for instance, suppose we are talking about a question of quality, perhaps, and you have fantastic quality control measures in place. Well, it's really boring to say, quality matters. We have fantastic measures of quality control in place, because that's, first of all, it's self-advertising, and nobody takes that seriously. Secondly, you're saying, trust me because I say so. And again, nobody's going to listen to that. And thirdly, this is not really the kind of content which sets the world on fire. However, find a case where quality control is actually a problem and explain that this, you put in a post and say, well, this doesn't have to be this way, because there are measures that can actually make it work better, and put a link to your better measures of what you've got as a process. So suddenly what you've done here is, in a very clever way, you moved on the conversation in social media, you made it relevant to what you do in terms of quality control in a particular aspect of your business, and then you linked it to your website where you actually showcase the process which you have in place. So by doing that, you are beginning to create the kind of conversation which sets you apart from the crowd. You begin to become a content creator or sort of a market leader in the conversations you create, but also you begin to guide search towards the kind of topics you talk about, the kind of topics you have on your website, and the relevance between the two. So suddenly the broader online conversation which you have, which is part of your search marketing and also your social media activity, begins to make sense in terms of search engine optimization when it comes to content that surfaces in search queries on Google, for example. And that's how it's done. So you have a broader strategy where you have to make sure that the dots are linked. You're not doing a little bit here and a little bit there without knowing why you do that and why you do this. I mean, that's just a waste of time and energy and effort and money. So really, you need to make sure that if you're doing this, it's linked to that. So your profiles have to be linked. Your topics have to be relevant. I mean, it's perfectly fine to do something on phishing if you have ever done anything on phishing before, because it's part of your personalization and getting some of your character across. But basically, most of the topics which you're going to be posting about will have something to do with your area of expertise, with the things you're known for, with your business activity, because that's your intentionality to a large extent when you're actually sharing content. 2 hard rules here. First one, don't be boring. Second one, don't be boring. Get really excited about what you do. If you create something simply because you feel you have to create it, that's the wrong way to go about it. So make sure that what you're doing really has meaning for you. You're really excited by it, and that will come across in the post. Your grammar doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't need PhD in anything to create great content. but you do need passion and fire. And those are the things people respond to. They're very human elements. That's why it's so hard to fake. And that's again why so many big brands fail here. Because what do? They hire somebody who is competent, but indifferent, because they're getting paid to do this. And they're saying, here it is, here's a social media account. Do it for us. Well, that hapless person who's usually underpaid and under-resourced usually does it. But he doesn't do it with feeling and passion because, he's probably locked up in a cubicle somewhere or somewhere, or even worse, working from home because, he's a sort of a distance worker. And he's not part of the organization. He's not fired up by what they're doing. They have forgotten about helping him understand what is important to them. So all this is reflected in his activities, and he fails, and then you get a post saying, social media marketing doesn't work. Well, yeah, that means you're not doing it right. Like a lot of people say, well, SEO doesn't work. Well, yes, again, what you're doing isn't right. That's why it doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think one way to look at it is, when you say something like social media doesn't work, if you find even a few people who have a opinion contrary to that, where it works for them, then that means that somebody is doing something different and somebody is doing something right because it works for them. And it's the same thing with SEO. If SEO did not work for anybody, then we would go and our Google response page would show nothing there because it doesn't work for anybody. So obviously it works for some people, and it's not magic, and it's not just a bunch of Google sites that come up whenever you're looking for anything. So it does work. I mean, it's common sense would say that it works, but there are certain rules and there are certain things you need to learn because Google doesn't spell out exactly what you need to do to be able to rise, through the ranks. So, I mean, like I said, it's basically common sense stuff, and it's a learning experience. But one of the things I want to touch on that David mentioned is that, I always try whenever I work with people is to explain to them that if you want to hire me to do your social media, it's fine, but you need to participate in the process as well. And that's why I make it very clear to most people is that whatever I do, whatever I know, I don't know your business as well as you do. I know my business, but I don't know your business. And I think the key thing that a lot of times is missed is you have business people who know that they know their business better than anybody else. So they try to get into the mode of being IT folks doing social media, which doesn't work very well a lot of times. And then you have the other approach where they say, well, I can't do this. I don't have time. I don't have the knowledge. I'm going to hire somebody to do it. So they hire somebody to come in off the street. And like David pointed out, this person comes in and they start doing their stuff, but they don't have sufficient knowledge, number one. And number two, they don't have any kind of passion for that particular approach. And, passion needs to be carefully dealt with because a number of people, including yours truly, by the way, have been misinterpreted a number of times. I make a lot of jokes. A lot of people don't get my jokes. Whether it's good or bad is irrelevant. What's relevant is the fact that they don't get it. And so some people get to the point of getting actually offended that they think I said something horribly offensive to them, or somehow they got insulted in terms of their prowess, all kinds of baloney like this, which is complete nonsense in real life. But actually, that's the way they feel. And, you can tell them till you're blue in the face that you didn't mean it. They're still going to basically call you. We can't say it on live radio, on live hangout here, so I'm not going to say it, but people do. So be cognizant of the fact that when you create content and you interact with people, and I highly recommend that you do start interacting with people because, like David was saying, what you need to link your stuff to various places that you're dealing with. But one of the things that you also need to keep in mind that engaging with people is one of the better ways to grow your sphere of influence, okay? Because they can see you, they can hear you, they can see where you're coming from. Sometimes they misinterpret, but most of the time that works fine. And so it ends up expanding your range. And some people may read your comment and they immediately +1 you, or they immediately circle you just because of that one comment, because you resonate in such a serious way with what you stated, even though you were not necessarily even be talking about this person. So it all makes a difference. And of course, Google looks at all of that. So it all makes sense to participate in more than just creating content. I mean, it's also content when you're basically, putting comments and stuff. So the important thing there, though, is, like I said, is you need to do it either with somebody who, if you don't want to do it yourself, somebody who knows how to do it from a technology standpoint, but you need to participate from a business knowledge standpoint. And when you fuse the two, then you have some magic happening from that standpoint. Do you disagree, David? Agree?
I totally agree. I think
Okay, no, no,
essentially,
no.
I mean,
That's it. That's it. There is no. If you agree, we're done. Okay. No, seriously
okay,
though. Seriously though, what I wanted to ask you, we kind of wanted to move because we already talked about it for a while. What I
okay.
wanted to ask you is the content itself, from a standpoint of being dated. We talked about your book, including Volkswagen Saga, which is extremely timely, and a lot of times people try to get things timely with online content, but it's not always possible. But what's more likely, putting that aside, is when you create content that's dealing with a particular event, or for example, you're putting something out that there's going to be a concert on such and such date, and so on and so forth around your venue. Obviously, that date will come and it'll go, and it's now gone. But potentially, it's a blog entry in your blog. So, should people be cognizant or do anything with the old content that's no longer relevant?
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is part of your content creation strategy, and content creation should do three things. You should be creating content that's evergreen. There's some aspects of your business when if you write about them, they will always be relevant. And these are usually operational. People want to know what you do, why you do it in a particular way, what's in it for them if they do business with you from a quality point of view or from a delivery point of view, or those are the sort of the practicalities. They don't go out of fashion because as long as your business exists, these are relevant. So that content should be there. Then you create content which is timely. Perhaps it's centered around an event. It's centered around something seasonal like Christmas, for instance, which only comes around once a year. And this kind of content, well, you have two choices. One, you can basically have pages which come online, then they become unpublished, and then you spruce it and bring it back on again. Or if it's something which has a particular relevance and you're not going to be repeating it even though it is seasonal because you're going to have a different theme perhaps, well, then you have that content for Christmas, for instance, and then you can have derivative content which explains the spirit of what happened in that particular thing. And that shows an aspect of your business which helps your audience connect with you. And I'll be very specific now. Let's look at Christmas, for instance. And let's say that you have a website, you only have a website, you don't have a physical shop, you make a big deal of Christmas, you have specific Christmas sales, you have something which is very specifically themed in your product or service, and that's it, right? That's all you do at Christmas. Okay, the thing is, in order to make that happen, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of thinking goes into it, there's a lot of preparation. Even if you're delivering something digitally, there's a lot of preparation that goes into that. And then there's the question why? I mean, you're not just doing it for the money, right? Because we're doing everything for the money, but that's not the only reason we're doing things for. So if you're thinking about something specifically for Christmas, you have a very specific idea of what's important to your audience, the Christmas spirit, goodwill, connections, all those things. If you write a blog post explaining your thinking behind this, the preparation and everything else, that becomes an additional touch point now, which links back to the previous post in terms of verification and suddenly gives you or gives your audience an additional layer of visibility into your business. Now, Oleg earlier mentioned about making things visible, peeling back layers, and I think that's exactly right. Now, if we take a physical shop, what does a shop do? Essentially, it sells stuff. If it sells stuff and that's stuff we want to buy, well, that's the easiest thing in the world, right? We don't really need a shop. What we need is a giant box. We pile all the stuff in there. We put a label on the outside what's in the box, and people just walk in there, scrounge around, pick what they want, and they give us money for it. But that wouldn't work, right? Because nobody wants to do that. What they want to do is walk into a shop, and the shop renders the box, which is a pile of stuff, visible in the layout, in the labels, in the staff which are there to help you answer questions, point you in the right direction, the right aisle. So essentially a shop is an unpacking of a box. Same thing with a website. A website should basically unpack your business. It should make it more visible, not less, more transparent, not less. It should help people find things a lot easier. They shouldn't have to look around for it too much. And that's where your real thinking has to go. That's where your real thinking has to occur. And also that's the point where essentially you show an intangible. You show that you actually care about your customers. Because that's the only way you have of showing it. You can tell them you care. But if they have to spend 30 minutes on your website trying to find an item, and they're getting really frustrated, I don't think they really get that you care very much, no matter how many times you say it. But if you make it easy for them to actually do that, and they feel good about the transaction, they feel they got value out of it, they think that they basically save time, perhaps save money, they got something worth their while from somebody they trust, that leaves them with a really good feeling, and that's a good thing to actually manage to do.
Absolutely. Over here we have a very important, relevant, comment from Kristen Drysdale, which I have to read. It says, "I've never understood how anyone cannot find you knee-slappingly witty, Oleg Moskalansky. You're okay by me, anyhow." And
That's very true.
Kristen is a sweetheart. I want to say it officially, recorded here, so everybody will know that Kristen Drysdale is absolute sweetheart. Not just for saying this, she said a lot of similar stuff before, so I appreciate Kristen. Okay.
But that shows also, Oleg, I mean, Kristen knows you, as I do, and it's very difficult to actually misunderstand somebody whom you have a connection with over some period of time, and you have begun to understand. But if you don't have that, if you come across anybody's posts in one-off, then yes, there's always room for misunderstanding because the context perhaps is not very clear, the cultural background may be different, the language may be different. So again, these are things which your content needs to have in mind in a broader aspect, and you need to be able to sort of cater to your audience for.
Translation: get to know people before you start joking with them. I get it.
Yeah.
Okay. But what about a specific example? For example, with let's say people had certain products, and they talked about them, they had posts about them, so on and so forth, and now that product is no longer part of their product line, but it's also somewhere buried deep in the bowels of their blog or something. Should people pay any attention to? In other words, should there be any situation at any point in time, in your view, from SEO standpoint as well as other standpoint, to do any kind of purging of content from before?
Definitely. Yes, and that's an excellent question. Pruning of content actually shows relevance, and it shows a tightening up of what you do in order for Google to actually understand that you're actually doing those things. Think of content which is out of date or it refers to products which you no longer have, like dust collecting in a shop. There's a shelf of products, you don't really care very much about them, and you left them there because, and people come in, and what do? They see dust, and what do they, on that one shelf only, right? What would they think? The whole shop is tainted with it as an image. Same idea Google uses for content in your website. If you don't prune old articles, if they're out of date, cut them off. I know you've written them and they're your babies and you think all these words, well, get rid of them. They're actually dragging you down. If you have content which is pointing to dead pages, it's talking about what happened back in 2005 and it's no longer relevant, get rid of it. Whatever happened in 2005 now has to stay in 2005 unless there's something in 2015 which actually is relevant. If it isn't, it's ancient history. So if you do that, actually your content and your site and your blog will do a lot better in search because Google finds you fresh and relevant and understands that you actually care about the content. You care enough to get rid of content that's irrelevant and use content which is more relevant, more specific, more detailed, more authoritative. So if you, and Google's run algorithm patches to make sure this happens. So websites that had a lot of irrelevant content thinking, oh, look at all those words, surely they must count for us. Well, they counted against you and that's the way it should be. So, you have to be very ruthless in that respect. And, you need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I think the thing that a lot of people look at, the whole thing with content and have a lot of questions about it from the standpoint that, number one, most people you talk to in business, they just don't have time. They just don't have the time, ever. They don't have the time. They're too busy. And then, so that's one problem. And so it's not so much not having the time as more prioritizing things to make time for something they don't really want to do. And none of us want to do what we don't want to do. And if you're looking at a business person who is not an expert on this particular field or interested in this particular field that much, then of course they're not going to have any time for it. I mean, that's a normal kind of response. And so when they do, so everybody needs to understand that creating good content is definitely work. Pruning content is definitely work. All of this stuff is work. And if you care about SEO, and if you care about being found on Google and having online presence that you're visible enough to actually generate some business, then you need to figure out how to make the time to either work on it yourself or hire somebody on the ball that can do it for you with your participation. Again, it's not going to be something you can just hand off and they're going to do a good job. They may not. Another problem with just handing it off is you're giving it to somebody. If they're not part of your ongoing team all the time, then they may not be there tomorrow. I mean, so they created this content for you for the last 2 months, and now they're gone, just like that, poof. And all of a sudden now people come to your website, I mean, to your blog, for example, or your website, and the content is 6 months old. There's no post for the last 6 months. And Google doesn't look at that very kindly when they look at this kind of stuff. They do not like things sitting with a bunch of dust on them. And so if you really truly care about SEO, not just saying it because your brother says it or your mother says it or whatever, you need to look in that and then kind of examine it and potentially set up 15 minutes every day or every week or every month, whatever the time is going to be, where you have, in your calendar, you fill it in as, this is my time to do social media. This is my time to do SEO type optimization, or at least give some thought to what kind of content I create. One of the things that David, I know, does, because he mentioned it to me before, is, he does this really exceptional literally pieces he calls Sunday Read. Every Sunday you can get that from him on all kinds of different topics. A lot of times these topics are relevant to what he's working on. Most of the time they're not even relevant to that. They're just something that's very timely, something that has to do with something that just recently occurred or happening anywhere in the world. Just if nothing else, some of these you may agree with, some of these you may disagree with, but the bottom line is it's always going to make you think. No question about it, every single one of these posts. And I highly recommend you, if you haven't seen them, I highly recommend you take a look at them. But one of the things that I know David does to create these things, he doesn't do them in one shot where he sits down and he just, creates the Sunday post. And David, you can correct me if I'm saying it wrong. As he finds different things and as he looks through different things at different times, he grabs relevant pieces, he drops them into a Google Keep, which is one of my favorite applications out there. And then he assembles the whole thing at some point in time from all these Google Keep snippets, if you will, that he grabbed. And I think it's an excellent approach for you to consider for your content creation, is that a lot of times you're busy, we're all busy, no question about that. But a lot of times you're busy, customer calls, and they said something that in your mind would be really cool to put into a blog post or a social media post, whatever it might be. Drop it immediately into Google Keep right then and there. Just a little bit of information about it, enough for you to remember what this is about in main points there. You don't have to write the actual post itself, and then just leave it there. And then later on, when you do have this time that you scheduled on your calendar for doing social media, and you're looking what content should I create, you just look at these Google Keep notes that you put for yourself, use a particular color to indicate which ones you've done, which ones you haven't, and then just simply change color once you use that particular note. And there you go. You got plenty of stuff, whether it's from the news, whether it's from something the client said, whether it's somebody asked you, somebody mentioned something in some review or something, doesn't matter. But you have everything now in a single place, all these Google Keep notes, and then you can create, if you only have 10 minutes of time you dedicate it to social media creation, you just look at your list, look at the topic, go ahead, throw in the post in there, put whatever you want to say on that particular topic, change the color of the Google Keep note, and you're done. If you only do one of these things and you do it, let's say, on a weekly basis, over time you'll see how much content you're generating and stuff. So all of these kind of things are pretty simple to do if you just kind of spread it out. If you just simply sit down and go, okay, I need to put some content for my website, and then you go completely blank in your head, most of us will be that way. It's really difficult to come up with something cool and something relevant just because right now you feel like you want to come up with it. It doesn't happen. Serendipity is a huge part of this thing. Don't you think, David?
Absolutely. And I think that is the best tip you can actually take away from this. You should make content creation part of your overall working life. So it should be integrated fully into it. It shouldn't be something separate which you touch if you have the time, when you have the time. That's the wrong approach to take. So it's an ongoing process, pretty much like answering emails and serving customers. And that's how you should approach it.
Right, and customer service, I always, talked about that, and always will talk about it because it's incredibly important that businesses don't just look at things from a standpoint of running the business and then dropping customer service like it's nothing. I mean, you can hire the best people to do SEO, you can pay them a ton of money, spend thousands and thousands of dollars over time. It means nothing if you don't take care of your customers in terms of customer service. And that's something that again, a major point to make. It has really nothing to do with content creation per se, but at the same time it works together with it really, really well, because whatever you're projecting online in terms of your content about you, like I said, for the sake of building credibility, reviews and things like that, that's completely goes down into the toilet if you don't have customer service to back it up. So you absolutely have to. Yeah, there's this one article I recently posted. Feel free to look at my PCS page and find it there about, it specifically talks about this technique called HERD. It's actually an acronym that stands for customer service. I can't remember the details of it, but it's funny that, in there's these 5 letters, 5 steps that people should be taking. And I noticed that most companies get to first 3, where they apologize to you and they're saying how sorry they are and blah, 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 but they're not taking care of the problem. And so the only thing they're doing is just irritating you. Certainly always irritates me. It's like the old George on Seinfeld saying, "It's not you, it's not me. I invented it's not you, it's me." Type deal. In this case, they're just basically saying that they're sorry and they're sorry it happened, blah blah blah. But when it comes to the point of what are you going to do for me to resolve this, then they're basically blank. They're not doing anything to resolve this. It's our policy. It's this, is that. So it's important to understand when you create content, it needs to be congruent with actually how you're running the business. It cannot be just content for the sake of content. It has to be content congruent with running the business, and running the business cannot possibly work unless you're doing customer service as part of it. So there you go, a little business 101 to go with our content discussion. I think we pretty much covered the aspects about how to create content, some specifics, some things what not to do. David, do you have some other words before we finish up today?
You mentioned earlier about being personal and being part of you, and that should definitely happen. People always say, how personal can I get? Well, this is not a license to overshare, and certainly oversharing isn't a substitution for good quality content or great quality customer service, but they should get a sense of who you are. So that again should be part of your overall. You must think, how do I get the personality of the people who work in my business, even if it's just one person business, across to the web? And that should be one of the challenges you should be tackling always.
Yeah, and then another way to look at the whole deal with interacting people on social media, on your website, doesn't really matter, your blog, is that you're interacting people in your normal life anyway. You're interacting with people on the street, you're interacting with people coming into your office. It's just what you do. And the online deal does nothing more than amplify it quite a bit, where you're able to interact with people. I mean, like for example, I have, speaking of my, as you can see right there, my spec zone, we'll do a little shameless plug there for this service for small businesses who don't have their own IT people. They can have their own IT department. One of the gentlemen I have in this particular, as part of the spec zone thing, is in California. Another lady is in Virginia, and I'm here in Washington State. And so right there's an example that, normally I would not be able to deal with these people in my normal Kirkland, Washington environment here, because they're not here. With having online presence amplifies that to a degree to be able to do it, but you need to do it. And going back to what David said about being passionate, basically being you, whatever you are. Some people may not like you. Some people may like you, just like it is in real life. Okay, I mean, it's just the way it is. And so you're trying to simply project who you are, what you are, be as honest as you can be. And then hopefully if you have some value for some people, then they're going to come to you. And it's just a bigger way to basically get out there to these people. So the moral of the story is, whatever flaws you have, whatever not flaws, but whatever attributes you have that are positive, and also whatever your flaws are, if you put it out to a certain degree in a normal fashion as you would normally, that's how you create the content for online as well. I mean, and that's the fact that what David preached before about saying you need to be you. And that's exactly what it is, that when you're looking at somebody's content online, the picture you get would be similar to if they met you in real life, interacted with you for a while. That's the name of the game. That's what you're trying to create, whether it's about you, whether it's about your business. And in addition to that, that's your identity part. Then you have the situation with your products or services being well defined, being well described, with additional information about that, with people indicating some things about you. Like David said, if you tell somebody how great you are and things like that, nobody could give a rip. Nobody's going to believe you, is what it is. It's not so much that they don't give a rip, they just wouldn't believe you. So simply saying that I'm so great and I'm the best out there and everything else, it's falling on deaf ears. But as weird as we are as people go, somebody else making the same exact comment about you makes a huge difference in these people's eyes, even though they don't know you and they don't know this other person. That's the thing that's weird, that if I say I'm great, nobody cares. But if David says I'm great, then it has a totally different impact. And David, I'm just using as an example. Obviously, if David says I'm great, then everybody knows I'm great. But I'm saying if it's just somebody who you don't even know says something about somebody else, it makes a big impact to people. That's why these reviews on Google and things like that are very important and very relevant. So you want to use all of these different tools that are available to you with social media, with blogs, with your website, with potentially participating in forums, getting out there a little bit that way. That's just a way for you to project yourself or amplify yourself that much more. And then you will see what the results are depending on the effort you put in and things you do. But it is an effort, no question. Creating content is effort, and creating good content is even more of an effort. And it's just part of the mix. If you want to be able to have these organic results and you want to be able to have people give you business, things like that, that's one of the things you have to do.
Awesome.
Dead space? No, we're done. No, I think we're done for today. David, always a pleasure. I wanted to remind folks again, I'll give you a few words at the end. Hold on a second. A few words again about the David's books. David has written many books. You can find all of them on davidamerland.com. So definitely go visit his website. If you don't have David circled, then you can't be listening to this broadcast because that would be impossible. But if you don't have it circled, definitely circle him and check out his content. If you don't subscribe to Sunday Read, definitely subscribe to Sunday Read. Excellent read every week. New book is coming out in the next couple of weeks here about trust and first-hand account. I can definitely say you can trust David with his books. I love his books. I haven't read all of them, but the ones I read, I love his books. And so with that, I think we'll wrap it up. David, last few words, and we'll close it up.
No, I think we've covered pretty much everything. And last thing on content is just keep it as real as possible. Avoid the hype. Hype doesn't work anymore.
Okay, no more hype. Okay, next installment, we're gonna let you know when chapter 6, step 6 is gonna be covered. And by that time, maybe we'll say a few words about the book because it'll be out by that time.
Yeah,
and you can catch David in all kinds of hangouts all over the place, so he's very visible. And if you need to look for me, you can find me on Google+. That's where I usually live, and I'm pretty easy to find, so anytime. With that, thank you, David, very much.
Pleasure.
And I'm going to go through the list here. We got Julie Holberg, who is here, as well as Luke Shearing, and we've got William Rockwell somewhere there, Jeff Bond, that we're putting some comments. It's almost like a
who's who?
Not who's who. No, it's not that. Kristen Drysdale, of course. It's almost like it's a water cooler situation. These folks are sitting there and saying hi to each other and talking about stuff and sending some comments. I didn't see any. I don't know if anybody asked any questions.
I didn't. I've been looking at it. It hasn't been anything too much because everybody's been talking about what we're talking about to each other. So I think that's brilliant because again, it shows the personalization that can take place on Google+. I mean, if we think about it in terms of what's happening, it's really weird. People are interacting with their screen, talking to the screen like it's a real person. There's a person behind that screen, and they're actually connecting on a very real human basis. And I think that's marvelous.
So
it's
basically,
a miracle of our time.
yeah, exactly. So none of these people usually talk to each other, but when David and I have a hangout, they come and they are able to interact freely in that kind of environment. So it's really cool, right, David?
Absolutely.
Something like that. Anyway, thank you, folks. Thank you all for coming, and pleasure. And we'll see you next time. Take care.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.